Thank you for the kind words. Hello. My name is Jody Lopez Jacobs, and Donald Jacobs is my grandfather. In fact, he was the only grandfather I ever really knew. And as a child growing up under his wing, I never truly appreciated how fortunate I was to have him as my grandfather, my grandpa. And you all already see what made him so special. His love for humanity, his love for nature, his endearing mannerisms, of which there are many. I took it for granted. I took for granted all the wonderful Sundays, the Sunday afternoons we'd spent with Grandma and Grandpa at their house in Landisville. And I took for granted all the wonderful family, the wonderful family that he and Grandma created. A family that I couldn't help but fall in love with. Sundays with Grandma and Grandpa were the best. Grandpa, as you know, was the type of person whose mere presence would bring energy into the room. And I relished that energy. That energy shined through the stories that he would tell about Africa and the many other places that he's visited. His storytelling pulled me. It pulled me in like a gravitational force, and it opened my mind and my heart to other worlds and cultures and perspectives I didn't know existed. Some of the best times with Grandpa were when we were all gathered together in the living room to watch Grandpa's slideshows. Yeah. Grandpa would breathe life into these still photos in a way that made me feel like I was there with him. And some of the stories were, frankly, quite hard to believe. But fortunately, Grandma was a reliable fact checker. So, in addition to Sundays with Grandma and Grandpa, we would also have many family vacations, wonderful family vacations, usually in the Outer Banks or the Chesapeake Bay. And there, Grandpa and I would bond over games of tennis that started playfully, but usually ended competitively. He had a crazy serve. And he would also attempt to teach me golf. And I would reliably disappoint despite his best efforts. I miss those days, and I miss Grandpa dearly. But in some ways I recognize that he'll never truly leave me. His impact on me is rooted in my bones. And at this point, his stories are as much a part of me as they were an extension of him. And I'm fortunate enough that I can literally hold the stories that he wrote in my hand, because he's written them into books. Perhaps my favorite book that he penned was this one here, his work of historical fiction, As the Wind Blows. In that book, he explains that while visiting the grave sites of his ancestors, whom he knew very little about, he felt the need to tell their stories that he did not know. And the book was his attempt to breathe life into his ancestors, just as he breathed life into those slides that he showed us on those wonderful Sunday afternoons. And in this book, in As Wind Blows, he says that while visiting those grave sites, quote, I could not just let my ancestors remain amorphous. I need to know my ancestors, because I am largely who I am because of them. These words ring true for me too. I am who I am because of him. His story is my story. And even though I will continue to miss him, I will never truly lose him. And his story will continue through all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, everybody. This is just amazing. I remember Dad saying in the last few years when he was still going to his friends' funerals and giving the tributes or the meditation or whatever, I think he was starting to wonder, is there going to be anybody left that will come to mind? So I'm sure this pleases him. And the accolades and all that would, pretty much go like that. But just seeing you all together, that would bless him so greatly. So thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it so much. And you're all his best friend, you know that. The last few years of his life, I know a lot of you kind of weren't aware of what was going on with him. In some ways, he was a private man in spite of his outgoingness and everything. But with his blood issues, he had low white and red blood counts. He just was diminishing over the past, maybe 2-3 years that we noticed. But his little niche in Lancaster County, there at home, was always the place where he could just relax and enjoy. He would enjoy the things from the smallest center of a flower to the scene he had of the Amish farm across the way, to the heavens where, as growing up, he'd often have a telescope on one of the planets or stars or the moon or something. So he always had that wonder of life that really didn't leave until maybe the last few months of his life or last weeks of his life or whatever. But we were able, if we were observing, to learn some things about how to let go, and I just want to keep remembering those because he was able to let go of various things along the way. Of course, we noticed it when he finally retired, at 85 or something. I think he said he was on the board global till he was 83 or something like that. And his very last board he left was the Theological College, which was only 2 or 3 years ago. So he just learned to let go, and he didn't look back, and he didn't look over people's shoulders. He would let go, move on, and leave the people that were following him keep doing what they were doing, just totally trusting. So I want to learn to be able to be that way. Then he had to give up his license. Then he had to give up so many things he was used to doing around the house, around the garden. And he just somehow kept that content spirit, and gratitude was always such a huge part of his life. We'd be going to medical appointments, so many medical appointments the last 3 months or so. And he always connected with his caregivers and would just be so grateful. One doctor had to work on his head, and it was terrible to watch. He was in incredible pain. And afterwards he said, "Thank you for that." And she says, "Nobody's ever thanked you for that." So he just that spirit was just always there for him. So you can relax and know that he was okay right up to the end. And then through hospice and all the family help we had, it was wonderful to be able to keep him at home. People could drop in and see him. Family could come by and say their goodbyes and their gratitude and all the things they loved about him. It was just so special. And then we were there with him when he took his very last calm, peaceful, amazing breath. And all the stress, all the fight for life was over. But I do think it was hard for him to give up on life. He loved living. He loved every aspect of living. So it didn't come easy for him. That's one thing that came difficult for him, I think. Anyway, those were some things from his last. But there was always Mother, like we've talked about. Mom she was his ballast. She kept his feet on the ground. She was the tether. His favorite place was always home. So if she wasn't with him, she was pulling him back. Wherever Mom was home for him. And it's hard to imagine one without the other. But Mom, you're going to be amazing. But they were a team, which we will always be grateful for. And as we were thinking about those last few days with him, it came to Mom that this was our time to syndekiza him. If you have been in a warm weather culture, and especially Tanzania and Kenya, if you go visit somebody, when you leave, you don't just leave from the front door. They'll walk you a distance. Sometimes it's halfway home. They'll walk you. And so we felt like this is what we were doing with my dad. We were syndicizing him as far as we could go. And then we had to let go. But it was such a blessing to be able to do that in our own home. So thank you for coming. And even though you're all his best friends, the grandkids and the great-grands, you know who you are. You had a special place in his heart carved out for you that nobody else ever filled. It's always going to be your special place. He loved you so much, so much. And like Jody said, a piece of his spirit is going to be in each one of you, and we're going to recognize that. We're going to see it. We'll see Grandpa in each other. So he won't die in our family. He'll still be there. So thanks so much for coming, and stay for the meal afterwards. That's what Dad would have wanted. And if you remember how Dad did that sort of thing, he would not be eating. He would just be strolling around. So just imagine Dad strolling around as we're visiting and chatting and enjoying being together. Thank you for coming.